All right, let's talk about business strategy. You've heard that term thrown around a million times, right? It sounds, well, kind of big and intimidating, like something that involves a 100-page document and a bunch of complicated charts. But what if I told you it doesn't have to be like that at all? Today, we're going to cut through all that noise and get to the simple, powerful idea at the heart of it all. So to kick things off, I want you to think about just one number, 90%. What do you think that number represents in the business world? Well, according to a study by Bridges Business Consultancy, it's actually pretty bad news. It points to a massive, widespread problem. Yep, you're seeing that right. A full 9 out of 10 businesses fail to hit the strategic targets they set for themselves. I mean, that's a shocking failure rate, isn't it? It just goes to show that for most companies, there's this huge gap between the plan on paper and what actually happens in the real world. So, what on earth is going wrong? And here, this is a huge clue. Research from the Harvard Business Review found something pretty mind-blowing. On average, 95% of employees don't even understand their company's strategy. Just let that sink in for a second. 95%. I mean, if the very people who are supposed to be making the strategy happen have no idea what it is, how could it ever possibly work? And that really gets to the heart of the problem we're diving into today. See, the issue isn't always that people are bad at doing the work. A lot of the time, the problem starts way earlier, with a really fuzzy, unclear idea of what strategy even is. So let's fix that. Let's get crystal clear on what we're really talking about here.
Okay, so here is a really important distinction to make. Business strategy is not about deciding which totally new industry you're going to go conquer. That's a different thing called corporate strategy. No, business strategy is all about how you win the game you are already in. Think about it like this. It's how Netflix figures out how to beat Disney Plus and all the other streaming services, not whether Netflix should suddenly start making, dishwashers.
All right, so if strategy is all about winning in your market, the big question is, how do you actually do it? Well, the secret isn't some crazy, complex formula buried in a textbook. It's actually a pretty simple but really powerful shift in your thinking. And here it is. The secret to great strategy? It's all about creating value. That's it. As HBS professor Felix Overholzer G explains, strategy really just boils down to one question. How can my business create more value for our customers, for our employees, and for our suppliers? When you focus on making the pie bigger for everyone involved, you build an advantage that is just so hard for anyone else to copy. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Value. That sounds a little fuzzy, right? A bit abstract. How do you actually see it? How do you measure it? And more importantly, how do you increase it? Well, this is where a brilliantly simple tool comes in to save the day. Meet the value stick. It's this awesome visual framework that takes that abstract idea of value and makes it totally tangible. So, let's walk through it. At the very top, you have willingness to pay, or WTP. That's the absolute max a customer would ever pay for what you offer. Then, a little lower, you have the actual price you charge. Below that is your cost to make it, and way down at the bottom is willingness to sell. That's the rock bottom price your suppliers need to stay in business. The real magic, the core of all strategy, happens in the spaces between these 4 points. So let's zoom in on the top of the stick. See that gap between what a customer was willing to pay and the price they actually paid? That space right there, that's the value the customer gets. We call it customer delight. And your goal as a strategist, make that gap as big as possible, because that's what creates fiercely loyal customers. All right, moving down the stick. The next chunk of value is the piece your company gets to keep. The space between the price you charge and your cost to produce, well, that's your profit margin. That's the value that fuels your business, pays the bills, and lets you invest in the future. And finally, let's look at the very bottom of the stick. That space between your cost and your supplier's absolute minimum price. That's their value, their surplus. And keeping your suppliers happy and healthy is absolutely crucial for your own business. So you see, a great strategy isn't about squeezing one part to benefit another. It's about figuring out how to stretch the entire stick and create more value for everyone involved.
Okay, so we've got our core framework, the value stick. That's our foundation. Now let's build on that and expand our toolkit a little bit, because creating value isn't just a one-way street. It's about a whole strategic ecosystem.
A truly winning strategy uses that value stick to think about the big picture. So beyond just your customers, you start asking, how can we create more value for our employees? They're basically suppliers of labor, right? Keeping them happy means lower turnover and better work. And what about your actual suppliers? How can you work with them to make that whole value pie bigger for everybody? The absolute best strategies create this incredible win-win-win situation.
Now, the value stick is our home base, but there are other awesome frameworks that can help us find creative ways to stretch it even further. Take jobs to be done. That framework helps you dig deep into what your customer is really trying to accomplish. When you nail that, you can massively increase their willingness to pay. Or think about disruptive innovation. That's all about finding new markets where you can lower your costs and serve customers that the big guys are completely ignoring. They're all just different lenses you can use to spot new opportunities for creating value.
But of course, having the most amazing, value-creating strategy in the world doesn't mean a thing if it just sits in a PowerPoint deck gathering dust, right? The real magic, where it all comes together, is in the execution.
And this is where things can get really tricky. I mean, it's easy to measure stuff like sales numbers or production costs, but what about all the intangible things? How do you track your progress on something like brand loyalty or company culture or the skills of your team? Those are often the things that create the most value in the long run.
This is exactly why a tool like the Balanced Scorecard is so powerful. It makes sure you're not getting tunnel vision on just the financial numbers. It forces you to look at your business from 4 different but connected perspectives. You ask, are our efforts in learning and growth making our internal processes better? And are those better processes making our customers happier? And then finally, is all of that leading to better financial results? See? It connects all the dots, from your big plan all the way down to the bottom line.
So let's bring all these pieces together for a second. We've gone from this big, scary idea of strategy to a really simple focus on creating value. And we've even found some great tools to help us visualize and measure it. This really is a whole new way of thinking about strategy.
And here's the best part. What this all boils down to is that you do not need to be a CEO to be a strategist. You don't need that corner office. Strategic thinking is a skill, it's a mindset, and it's something that absolutely anyone can learn and practice, no matter what your job title is. And it all starts with asking that one simple question: how can I create more value?
You know, this quote from Professor Oberholzer G just sums it all up perfectly. The big takeaway is that strategy doesn't have to be this difficult, scary thing. All you need is a proven framework to guide your thinking. With tools like the value stick and the balanced scorecard in your back pocket, anyone, and I mean anyone, can learn to think and act more strategically.
So, I want to leave you with one final thought, a little challenge. Forget about the grand 5-year strategic plans for just a minute. Instead, I want you to ask yourself this: what is one small thing you could do tomorrow to create just a little bit more value for a customer, a colleague, or even a supplier? Because that right there is where real, powerful strategy begins.